Good afternoon. My name is Tim Shriver. I am so pleased and proud to welcome all of you to this very important briefing with extraordinarily well-informed, expert, and insightful guests at an extraordinary moment in time. It's my honor on behalf of CASEL and the Committee for Children to promote a new vision, a new paradigm, a new message about the power, the importance, the urgency of education. For a generation, we have thought that educators are deeply divided from their reformer cousins. This report says, contrary to popular opinion, they are not divided. For a generation, we have thought that business and education don't speak the same language. This report says they are speaking exactly the same language. For a generation, we have thought that schools and classrooms did not have the same responsibility as pupil personnel or community-based organizations. This report says they have very similar, in fact, strongly nested responsibilities. For a generation, we have thought that mental health was the province of people in clinical settings and education was completely divorced from it. This report says that's exactly wrong, that they have very similar common ground. Maybe most importantly, here in the Capitol, for a generation, we have thought that Republicans and Democrats don't agree about schools. This report says, without any exception, that Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and progressives, label whoever you want. There is a deep and powerful consensus that Republicans and Democrats can join together in assuring that when we focus on how children learn, when we focus on the art and science of teaching and learning, we have agreement. That children learn through a social filter, that the way in which children learn is not only a process which we need to focus on, but a product we need to create, that as we continue our long conversation in education about what kind of country we want to become, that the moment has come for us to focus on integrating the child, the social, the emotional, the cognitive development, to end the barriers that lead so often to the underperformance of children and begin to open the doors of learning to all. So if I had just one saying, it would be that the era of either or is over. It is not a question of whether we teach the heart or the head. It is not a question of whether families or teachers. It is not a question of academics versus relationships. All of those dichotomies are over. And there is a consensus. This is not some political vantage point, not some new avatar of ideas coming from some academic institution. This is a broad consensus from neuroscience right up to Capitol Hill. We have a new era. It is the era of both and. And you are here today to hear, and I hope help us act on the most powerful lever of change we have, which is the possibility of once and for all shifting the training of teachers from simply being the training of people in the distribution of content and information to the training of teachers as experts in child development. We believe, and the report reinforces, that the most powerful change we can make in education would be to equip teachers to become experts in child development. After all, we believe education is fundamentally the practice of development. It is time we brought the field of development into the field of education, equipping our teachers not just to know science or history or mathematics or social studies, foreign languages or great literature, but also to know children and to know that those two bodies of work with equal expertise.
Some of the data now shows us that about 50% of teachers leave within the first 5 years of teaching, costing us $7 billion because of leaving. And when you ask teachers, why are you leaving the profession? They say things like classroom management, problems, dealing with the stress, all of those factors, especially the attrition rate is much higher in those high urban centers. And when you ask them, what do they wish they would have learned? They say, I wish I would have, in my teacher preparation program, had more coursework on how to deal with the whole child, the social and emotional aspects of teaching and learning. If you are taught these skills in elementary school, if you receive social and emotional learning, one longitudinal study found that you're more likely to be employed, to have higher economic assets, but also you're more likely to vote and to volunteer in your community. So again, thinking about these, again, it's no longer a question, do we do it or not? The data are very clear.
We kept repeatedly, as we were in the field, hearing from teachers, hearing from building and from school and district leaders, well, what about the adults? And, as we ask teachers to implement our program, they say, how do you expect me to teach this when I didn't grow up with this? I didn't get this in school, and I'm learning this along with my kids. And what they really want is better preparation in order to meet that challenge. They understand the need for this.
In a recent survey of our staff perceptions on the SEL implementation, 94% are strongly supportive of the work that we are engaging in. Yet only 57% feel that they have the skill set to carry it out. So we still have our work cut out for us, though we've been at this for about 2.5 years. And I want to just echo what Dr. Schonert-Reichl shared, and that is that how students feel impacts how they learn. And that's very true of the adults as well. They're not immune from the same things that impact students. They also experience traumas and stressors and so on and so forth. And so much of our focus on adult learning is focused on self-care, on being able to manage behaviors that has been shared before, because the best resource that we actually have in the classrooms are our teachers. The best way to teach this, apart from an evidence-based program, is to model.
What we're doing is actually looking at these young people, for the most part, at a transitional phase in their lives. They are people seeking others in many regards, and they're looking for a community. We are providing that community, and in that community, we are addressing the kinds of experiences that will allow them to look at themselves as learners to begin with, to look at themselves as social emotional beings in a community of practice. And by practice, I'm actually referring to the idea that this learning and becoming an educator happens over time. They come into our program, we spend a considerable amount of time building this community with them in support of practicing educators and leaders. And as they exit as graduates of our program, we are in community with them and the schools in which they're serving. So we think about that as from a whole school university community partnership.
The kids who struggled under No Child Left Behind, who were left behind, are challenged with social, emotional issues that have gone unaddressed in our school districts. So to be honest, SEL is the missing piece. If we had this from the beginning, I don't know that we would have gone through 2 reiterations of No Child Left Behind to now ESSA, Every Student Succeeds. But for every student to succeed, we need that social emotional foundation, both in the kids and in our teachers. This is not limited to one community or one zip code to solve. SEL is about our entire community and our spectrum of kids in ways that we don't know are experiencing trauma. And you can experience trauma whether you're a poor kid or a rich kid. It's just the form of what that trauma is. And it's the mix of academic and social emotional supports. It's what great schooling has to be. Every great school needs to have a climate where academic and social emotional needs have been met. And the reality is where we have the work to do is with the social emotional support and fill-in at every level, private school, public school.
The good news is that there are actually programs that do this really well. They're just not implemented at scale, and they're not widely available. So for example, there are programs that have shown that when you train teachers in stress management, in mindfulness, in relationship skills, that not only do you reduce their stress and burnout, but that you see the impact of that in their classroom so that they have more positive and more productive classes. And we've seen programs that have tried to, that have attuned teachers to empathy for their students and found that those programs reduced referral rates, suspension rates, by about 50% school-wide. So the science is there. We know how to do this. Now what we just need is to make these effective programs and these effective trainings available at scale, and available to teachers earlier in their training.
Sometimes there's a big discussion about safety and security in our schools today. We need to harden our schools on the outside, more cameras, more metal detectors. The truth is, to get our schools more safe and secure, we need to soften them on the inside with social emotional learning and supports. So when we really want to talk about the security of our schools for the future, the path is through SEL. And last year when we did our security review, we didn't ask for more security guards, we didn't ask for more cameras. We got more school psychologists and social workers, particularly at our middle school when we see social emotional stresses higher. But we need state and federal support. And here we need federal support now for those social emotional supports. Districts like Fairfax have the wealth to do it. Many districts are waiting in desperation. And that's part of the teacher turnover. They're getting out because they're crying for help. The universities haven't helped them. The school districts haven't helped them. They're looking for the federal government to help. So now's the time to act.
Do you wish you were watching the hearings across the way where our country is devolving into all kinds of, but it is actually interesting that we're here today, actually at this exact moment. And if you tracked this conversation against the other one, and you just tracked word graphs, forget what side of the political spectrum you're on. In my view, we're hearing a discussion about an emerging country that most people don't even know is happening. Because we think, I mean, again, I'm not going to get political here, but we think what's happening over there is actually what's controlling the future of the country. But this conversation about helping children to understand and regulate their emotions, to connect, to make meaning, to make purpose, to have character, to have grit, to have resilience, to have hope, to achieve academically. This conversation is actually, if you ask me, and obviously I'm biased, the headline right now in the country. In my view, at least, the goal here is a paradigm shift. It goes back to a very basic principle that many of us learned, many of us did learn in our early years, which is that teaching and learning is a relationship. And so to be able to be in that relationship, if you're a teacher, you have to be culturally competent if you're going to be effective. And learning to be culturally competent will include learning listening skills, learning dialoguing skills, learning to understand the child's way of expressing him or herself, learning to identify barriers to learning that may be unique to that particular, not just race or culture, but community, school, neighborhood. Learning to be able to identify how to help children overcome stress and trauma or other adverse experiences. So the field we're trying to create here, which we're calling social and emotional learning, is really just a platform around which many of these issues will begin to surface and we'll get better at them, but they're not separate, if you will, from one another. They each have a role, I believe, in the reforms we're describing.